The machete gleamed in the moonlight as Hauwa's uncle raised it above his head, his eyes blazing with ancestral fury. "You will never marry that boy," he roared, the blade trembling in his grip. "Over my dead body will the daughter of a district head unite with the son of the man who destroyed our family." Hauwa stood frozen in the compound, her hand clutched tightly in Aminu's. Behind them, the entire village had gathered, torches casting dancing shadows across their shocked faces. Her father, Alhaji Musa, sat silently on his wooden chair, his face carved from stone. The silence that followed her uncle's threat was deafening, broken only by the crackling of flames and the distant cry of night birds. "Uncle Sani, please," Hauwa's voice cracked, but she didn't let go of Aminu's hand. Blood trickled down her arm from where she'd cut herself on the fence trying to escape earlier that evening. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Her uncle's voice shook the very air. "This boy's father is the reason your mother is dead. The reason our lands were cursed. And you dare bring him here, to this sacred compound, and declare your love." He spat on the ground, and several elders murmured in agreement. Aminu stepped forward, shielding Hauwa with his body. "Sir, I am not my father. Whatever sins he committed, they are not mine to bear. The sins of the father follow the son for 7 generations," another elder shouted from the crowd. "It is our custom. It is our law." Alhaji Musa finally raised his hand, and everyone fell silent. His eyes, usually warm when they looked at his daughter, were now cold as harmattan wind. "Hauwa," he said slowly, each word deliberate. "You have one choice to make tonight. Him or your family. Choose wisely, because once you decide—" 15 years earlier, the village of Dutz was a different place. The farmlands stretched green and endless. The market bustled with traders from distant towns, and 2 families, the family of Musa and the family of Ibrahim, were as close as brothers. Their compounds shared a fence, and their children grew up playing under the same mango tree that stood between their homes. Hauwa was only 5 years old when she first met Aminu. He was 6, with a gap-toothed smile and dirt permanently under his fingernails from helping his father in the fields. Their mothers, Fatima and Zainab, were best friends who cooked together, traded recipes, and watched each other's children as if they were their own. "Catch me if you can," little Hauwa would squeal, racing through the compound with Aminu chasing after her, both of them laughing until their sides hurt. They would climb the mango tree together, share stolen sugarcane from the market, and make grand plans about the future. "When we grow up, I'll be a big farmer like my father," Aminu declared one afternoon, dangling his legs from a tree branch. "I'll have the biggest farm in all of Dutz. And I'll be a teacher," Hauwa said, her eyes bright with dreams. "I'll teach all the children in the village to read and write. Promise we'll always be friends?" Aminu asked, extending his pinky finger. "Always," Hauwa agreed, linking her small finger with his. But everything changed on one terrible night when Hauwa was 10 years old. Her father, Musa, and Aminu's father, Ibrahim, had both invested heavily in a joint farming venture. They'd borrowed money from a wealthy merchant in the city, promising to repay double after the harvest. The rains came as expected, the crops grew tall and promising, and both families celebrated their coming fortune. Then Ibrahim made a decision that would haunt 2 families forever. 3 days before the harvest, he secretly sold the entire crop to a different merchant for a higher price, took all the money, and disappeared into the night. He left behind a note claiming Musa had cheated him for years and that he was only taking what was rightfully his. The next morning, when the merchant's men came to collect the harvest, they found the fields empty. Musa was left with nothing but debt and shame. The merchant demanded his money, and when Musa couldn't pay, he seized everything: the farmland, the cattle, even the family's precious heirlooms. Worse still, the shock and stress caused Hauwa's mother, Fatima, to collapse. She died 3 days later, her heart simply giving out from the betrayal and loss. The village turned against Ibrahim's family immediately. Aminu's mother, Zainab, was spat upon in the market. Their compound was vandalized. And young Aminu, who knew nothing of his father's crimes, suddenly found himself alone. 10 years passed like water through fingers. Hauwa grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's gentle eyes and her father's strong spirit. True to her childhood dream, she became a teacher at the village primary school, beloved by her students and respected throughout Dutz. But despite the many suitors who came calling, despite her father's gentle suggestions that it was time to marry, Hauwa's heart remained locked away, the key buried somewhere in her distant past. Then one rainy season afternoon, everything changed. Hauwa was walking home from school, her books balanced on her head, when she heard a commotion near the market. A truck had overturned, pinning a young boy beneath its wheel. People stood around shouting and crying, but no one seemed able to help. The truck was too heavy, and the boy's screams pierced the air. Without thinking, Hauwa dropped her books and rushed forward. "We need more people," she shouted. "On my count, 1, 2, 3. But the truck barely budged. The boy's screams grew weaker. Suddenly, a strong voice joined hers. "Let me help." A tall young man pushed through the crowd, his muscles straining as he positioned himself at the truck's edge. "Everyone, together now." Hauwa glanced at him and froze. Those eyes. That voice. Something familiar stirred in her chest, but there was no time to think. "Now," they shouted together, and the truck lifted just enough for 2 men to pull the boy free. The crowd erupted in cheers and prayers of gratitude. The young man turned to Hauwa, breathing hard, and their eyes met properly for the first time in a decade. Recognition flashed across both their faces simultaneously. "Hauwa," Aminu whispered, his voice filled with disbelief and wonder. "Aminu." Her books lay forgotten in the mud, her heart pounding against her ribs. For a moment, the world around them disappeared. The cheering crowd, the crying child, the pouring rain. They were children again, sitting in their mango tree, making promises about forever. "You came back," Hauwa breathed. "I never wanted to leave," Aminu said softly. "Not a single day went by that I didn't think about you, about this place, about." "Hauwa." A sharp voice cut through the moment like a knife. Uncle Sonny stood at the edge of the crowd, his face twisted with recognition and rage. "Step away from that boy. Now." The crowd fell silent, sensing the tension. Those old enough to remember began whispering urgently, the name, Ibrahim, passing from lip to lip like poison. "Uncle, please, he just saved that child," Hauwa started. "I don't care if he saved the entire village," Sonny roared. "He is the son of Ibrahim, the man who killed your mother. Have you forgotten your own blood?" Aminu's face hardened, but he didn't back away. "I came back to make things right. My father is dead now. He died 2 years ago, full of regret for what he'd done. With his last breath, he begged me to return here, to apologize to your family, to try to repay the debt. Blood money cannot bring back the dead." Sonny spat. "Your father destroyed us. You will leave this village before sunset, or I will make you leave." But Hauwa did something that shocked everyone, including herself. She stepped closer to Aminu, not away. "No," she said quietly but firmly. "Aminu is not his father. He was a child, just like me. We were friends once. We can at least hear what he has to say." The crowd murmured with surprise and disapproval. Uncle Sonny's face turned purple with fury, but before he could respond, Hauwa's father appeared, drawn by the commotion. Alhaji Musa looked at Aminu for a long, heavy moment. The boy had his mother's kind eyes, Musa noted. Zainab had been innocent in all of this, swept up in her husband's sins. "Come to my compound tomorrow," he said finally, his voice weary. "We will talk. But this does not mean I forgive. It means only that I will listen." That night, Hauwa couldn't sleep. She lay on her mat, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with memories and possibilities. Aminu was back. After all these years, he was back. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Aminu didn't just apologize, he worked. He toiled in the fields of those his father had wronged, asking for no payment. He repaired fences, carried water for elderly widows, and slowly, grudgingly, some of the villagers began to soften. He had brought money too, his life savings from working construction in the city, which he offered to Alhaji Musa as partial repayment. 3 months after Uncle Sani's threat, Aminu did the unthinkable. He went to Al-Haji Musa and formally asked for Hauwa's hand in marriage. The entire village knew within hours, and opinions split like wood under an axe. Some admired Aminu's courage and saw in him a good man trying to right his father's wrongs. Others saw only the son of Ibrahim, a snake that could never change its skin. Al-Haji Musa sat in silence for 3 days, wrestling with the decision. He watched how Aminu had transformed the community, how he'd brought prosperity back to families his father had ruined, how his daughter smiled for the first time since her mother's death. But he also felt the weight of tradition, the expectations of his community, and the raw, unhealed wound of his wife's death. On the 3rd day, he called a village council meeting. Every elder, every family head, gathered in the square. Uncle Sani arrived with his machete, making his position clear. The tension was thick enough to choke on. "I've considered this matter from every angle," Al-Haji Musa began, his voice heavy with authority and pain. "Aminu has proven himself to be a man of honor. He has worked tirelessly to restore what his father destroyed. He has shown respect, humility, and courage." But the word hung in the air like a sword. Hauwa's heart sank. But tradition is not something we can simply ignore. The pain his father caused runs deep. "My wife, Hauwa's mother, died because of his father's betrayal. How can I bless a union that reminds us daily of that loss?" "Then don't." Hauwa's voice rang out clearly. She stood up, facing her father with tears streaming down her face, but her voice steady. "Don't bless it, father. I release you from that burden. But I will not release Aminu. I love him. I have always loved him. And if I must choose between the family that raised me and the man who completes me, then I choose both. I choose to honor you by building a family rooted in love, not hate. By breaking cycles, not continuing them." The crowd erupted in shouts and arguments. Uncle Sani lunged forward with his machete raised, and that was when we returned to our opening scene. The blade gleaming in moonlight, the village holding its breath, the impossible choice laid bare. "Choose," Al-Haji Musa commanded. "Him or us." Hauwa looked at her father, the man who had raised her with tenderness despite his grief. Then she looked at Aminu, the boy who had been her first friend and had grown into a man of integrity. Finally, she looked at her own hands, trembling but strong. "I choose love," she said simply. "I choose forgiveness. I choose the future over the past." She stepped forward and placed her hand on her uncle's machete, pressing the blade against her own palm. "If you want to spill blood tonight, uncle, spill mine. Because Aminu and I are one now. Whatever you do to him, you do to me." The blade cut into her skin, blood dripping onto the dusty ground. The crowd gasped. Uncle Sani stared in horror at his niece's blood on his weapon, and slowly, his hand began to shake. The machete fell to the ground with a clatter that seemed to echo forever. "You would die for him?" Sani whispered, his voice broken. "I would live for him," Hauwa corrected. "I would build with him. I would heal with him. Isn't that what mother would have wanted? Not more death, but more life? Not more hate, but more love." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Al-Haji Musa stood up from his chair. He walked toward his daughter, and everyone waited to see if he would strike her or embrace her. When he reached her, he took her bleeding hand in his and wrapped it with his own wrapper. "Your mother," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "would have been proud of your courage. She always said you had a warrior's heart." He turned to Aminu. "I do not forget what your father did. I will never forget. But I see now that you are not him. You are better than him. And perhaps that is its own form of justice." Uncle Sani collapsed to his knees, weeping. "Forgive me," he choked out. "Forgive me. I've been carrying this rage for so long, I forgot what it felt like to carry love instead." The wedding took place 3 months later under the same mango tree where Hauwa and Aminu had played as children. It wasn't a grand celebration. Some relatives still refused to attend, their wounds too fresh to heal. But those who came witnessed something powerful. 2 families, broken by betrayal, beginning to mend through the courage of two young people who refuse to let history dictate their destiny. As Hauwa and Aminu exchanged their vows,